Thank you, Chairman Duncan, Chairwoman McMorris Rogers, Congressman Pfluger for inviting me, and to all the members of this distinguished committee for making the arduous trip to Midland, Texas, the heart of the Permian Basin. It's an honor to speak with you today. I'm Steve Pruett, founder and CEO of Elevation Resources, a private Midland-based independent oil and gas company that happens to be owned by East and West Coast institutions and myself. We're active in drilling and operating horizontal wells in the Permian Basin. I'm also chairman of the Independent Petroleum Association of America, which I'll refer to as the IPAA, which represents over 6,000 independent oil and gas companies and individuals in 33 states. We're based in Washington, D.C., so you'll be seeing me more over the next 2 years. Elevation, along with the other active drillers in the Permian Basin, rely upon horizontal drilling and multi-stage hydraulic fracturing to develop unconventional shales that comprise over 90% of the oil and natural gas production in the Permian Basin today. As Congressman Pfluger said, in 2008, we were producing about 700,000 barrels a day. And thanks to horizontal drilling and fracking, we're now producing 5.6 million barrels per day. And we've got more upside from there. I'm going to discuss 3 factors that affect and limit the growth of U.S. natural gas production, U.S. oil and gas production. That is the impact of regulatory uncertainty, permitting delays, and labor and supply chain shortages. So regulatory uncertainty has constrained capital formation and the reinvestment of cash flows needed to increase U.S. oil and gas production. As a result of the COVID-induced oil and gas price collapse, over 300 oil and gas companies and oilfield service companies filed for bankruptcy protection, and many ceased operations permanently. The universe of investors who will invest in oil and gas companies is dramatically smaller than a few years ago due to ESG concerns and financial losses. The number of banks loaning money to oil and gas companies is half what it was 5 years ago due to loan losses and ESG mandates from their investors. The EPA is drafting rules for Quad O, B, and C implementation, which dictates the equipment and practices we use to manage and reduce emissions. The EPA is in the rulemaking process for the Inflation Reduction Act methane fee, which is ambiguous and gives the EPA a license to tax our industry as they see fit. The IPAA supports Congressman Pfluger's H.R. 484, the Natural Gas Tax Repeal Act, as it addresses the tax that's singularly focused on the oil and natural gas industry, implemented by the EPA, which does not have taxing authority or the resources to do so, and utilizes a taxing formula that's flawed at best. We believe that much of this language was drafted by environmental firms that really know nothing about our business. Rest assured, Elevation and our peers have made and continue to make substantial investments in methane recovery. All of our operations are closed systems. We've also invested in emissions monitoring and reduction technologies ahead of the EPA rules. Oil and gas producers utilizing these technologies produce the lowest emission oil and gas in the world here in the Permian Basin. IPAA also supports Chairman Duncan's H.R. 150, Protecting American Energy Production Act. State regulatory bodies have been delegated primacy from the EPA, and in Texas, we believe the Railroad Commission and TCEQ are best informed and best staffed to regulate oil and natural gas operators in their respective states. Giving the President authority to shut down hydraulic fracturing is akin to killing the shale revolution, which is responsible for growth in U.S. oil production from 5 million barrels a day in 2008 to 12.3 million barrels a day presently. And natural gas production has increased from 56 billion cubic feet a day in 2008 to over 100 BCF today, which has been an economic engine for our country and, as Congressman Pfluger reminds us, for our allies in providing cheap, reliable energy. Permitting delays for infrastructure development limits growth in U.S. oil and gas production. Without pipelines, processing plants, export terminals, oil and gas production in the U.S. will not grow as we need markets for our product. Examples include the permitting of reactivating the Freeport LNG export facility, which is 20% of LNG exports over 2 BCF a day to our allies in Europe. And there's other LNG export terminals waiting on years for FERC approvals. Permitting natural gas pipelines serving the Northeast, where power generators are still burning coal, and homes and businesses still burn heating oil and import LNG from abroad, not from the U.S. Gulf Coast, due to the Jones Act. That needs to be fixed. And leasing federal land does not translate into drillable locations, as many other permits and easements are needed. There's the BLM in Carlsbad, New Mexico, sitting on stacks of permits that are needed because a well's not going to be drilled if they can't get product to market. Finally, labor and supply chain constraints have not been aided by the Biden administration's negative messaging. Further, the oil industry is aging. My generation's approaching retirement, setting our industry up for the great crew change. However, there are not enough young people to replace my generation in the oil industry. Over the last 2 years, the oil fields experienced 15% wage inflation if you can find the qualified workers. We've also experienced months-long delay in completing and repairing wells due to manpower and equipment shortages. Drilling and completion costs for my company are up 40%, and we still have escalating costs for steel, labor, while we have very weak natural gas prices because we don't have adequate pipeline capacity. To reduce uncertainty and improve the investment climate needed to grow U.S. oil and gas production, we need Congress to provide oversight of the EPA, the Department of Interior, the FERC, and the SEC as it relates to regulations affecting the oil and natural gas industry. Thank you very much.